String compression. Now this problem is confusing for all the wrong reasons, and that's attributable to the poor description that's given in the problem. I'm going to try my best to clear this confusion and solve this problem in an easy and understandable way. Let's go ahead and begin by reading the description. We're given an array of characters. We need to compress it using the following algorithm. So we begin with an empty string s, and for each group of consecutive repeating characters, if the group's length is 1, append that character to s, otherwise append the character followed by the group's length. Now additionally, they say that the compressed string s should not be returned separately, but instead be stored in the input character array characters. Note that the group's lengths that are 10 or longer will be split into multiple characters in characters. After you're done modifying the input array, return the new length of the array. And finally, you must write an algorithm that uses only constant extra space. Now, this first and foremost is contradictory because they said they want us to create a new string s and append characters to it. So solving this algorithm with a constant extra space is not possible. And second of all, it's not really clear what they want us to return. Do we return the modified array? Do we return the length of the string that we need to create, or the modified array itself? So it's not very clear what we need to do. And before I go any further, let's just go through a quick example to see what exactly we need to do. So as you can see, we have an array of characters A, B, B, C, C, C. For characters that have duplicates like A, B, and C in this example, what we need to do is we need to create an empty string and append to it the individual character with the times that it appears in the array. So for example, A appears twice, B appears twice, and C appears 3 times. So in the end, we're going to have a string that looks like this: A2, B2, C3. However, if we have a character that only appears once, like A, then we don't return A1, we just return A. So if we have a string like this, as you can see, A only appears once, so we don't return A1, we just return A. And then B appears 12 times, so we have to return 12. And something we need to watch out for is the fact that not only do we need to create a string, but we also need to modify the input array that they gave us. As you can see, it looked like this in the beginning, and then we have to modify it to look like this. Now we know in Java arrays are a fixed size, so we cannot modify the size of the array. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to modify this array to look like this, and then everything after, and then all the remaining characters in the original array are going to be placed after this 2. So it's going to be like A, B, 1, 2, B, 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 because we cannot modify the size of an array in Java. But the compiler is only going to look at this part of our solution. And also one thing to watch out for is in the string we have AB12, but we need to modify our array. We don't put 12 as a single unit in our array since it's characters. We have to put 1 and 2. So going back to the contradictions, we're not going to write an algorithm that uses only constant extra space. We're going to follow the algorithm that they gave us and create a string s. And then what are we going to return? We're going to return the length of that string s. And I assume what Java does is that it takes that length and takes our modified array, and then it only extracts that length of that array, our string's length from that array. So without further ado, let's begin solving. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to instantiate some variables. The first variable I'm going to create is a character variable called current character, which is going to be equal to characters at 0, so the very first element in our characters array. Then I'm going to create an int variable, int count, which is equal to 1. And then finally, I'm going to create our string s, which is equal to empty quotations first. So let me briefly explain what these variables are going to help us do. Our character variable current character initially is going to be the very first element in our array. What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to iterate through the elements of our array. And before I continue, we have integer count, which is equal to 1. And what count is going to do is it's going to count the number of times a duplicate character appears. Now going back to current character, we start at the very first element, which is A. We're going to loop through the elements of our array. And every time we stumble onto a duplicate that comes right after current character, so they have to be sequential, one after another, what we're going to do is we're going to increment our count. So here we stumble onto another A, we increment our count, and then eventually we'll hit a character that's not the same as A. And when that happens, what we're going to do is we're going to append to our string S current character, which is A, the very first element, and the count, or the number of times that it appeared, before we update our current character to be the next element that is not equal to our old current character. And obviously we're going to reset our count to 1 so we can now account for other duplicates. So let's iterate through our characters array. We have to start at I equals to 1 since characters at 0 is already A. So for int I equals to 1, as long as I is less than characters dot length I plus plus, we're going to check if characters at I, the element which we're on, is equal to current character. And if that's the case, we're going to increment our count plus plus. So as long as the character which we're on is equal to the current character which we're studying, we're going to increment our counter. Otherwise, what we're going to do is to our string S, we're going to append current character. And then what we want to do is we want to check if count is greater than 1. And if that's the case, then we also need to append the count. So, and to do that, we're going to call our wrapper class integer and use the function toString count. So we took our int count, turned it into a string, and we appended it to S. So why did we do this? As I explained in the description, if we have an individual character, so there's no duplicates that come after it, right after it I mean, then we don't need to append the count. We just need to leave it as it is, just A, which we cover here, and S plus equals current character. So after that, what are we going to do? We need to update our current character to be characters at I, which means this is the very next element that is not a duplicate of the old current character, and we need to reset our count to be equal to 1. Now we're not done, because with this code it works almost perfectly up until we reach the last element, which is not a duplicate of the current character which came before it. So for example, here in example 1, eventually when we cover the B's and we move on to C, if you go through our code, when we hit this C and our current character is this C, which I have highlighted, once we hit this C, our count is going to increment to 2, and then when we hit this C, our count is going to increment again to 3, and then we're going to exit our for loop without appending the count to C itself. And so we need to account for this by simply repeating the statements above outside of the for loop. And once again, if count is greater than 1, then S plus equals integer dot toString count. So go through the code and then you'll understand why we need to include these two statements after our for loop. It's just to account for the last group of consecutive characters. So at this point, the hard chunk of the code is done, and now we just need to modify the array and return the length of our string to complete the code. And so to do that, for int I equals to 0, as long as I is less than our string dot length I plus plus, we're going to take character at element I and we're going to make it equal to S dot character at I, and that's it. So we're going to loop through the length of our string. Let's say we went through example 1 and we have a string A2, B2, C3. Characters at 0, which was originally A, is going to be replaced with our character at index 0 in our new string S, which is also A. Characters at 1, which was A, is now going to be 2, and then so on and so forth. And then finally, all we need to return is S dot length. So let's submit our code and see if it works. Accepted. So the question itself isn't that hard. It's just the description is pretty poor in wording what exactly we need to do. And so I hope my video was able to clear up that confusion and you were able to solve it and you understood how we solved it together. And with that being said, once again, I hope you found that video helpful, and thanks for watching.